welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be stepping into a world where emperors threw parties that would make even the wildest spring break trip look tame. We're diving deep into the sex lives of ancient Romans. Forget roses and romantic gestures. In ancient Rome, sex wasn't about love. Think power, social status, and control. It was a tool used to navigate the complex social hierarchy of the Roman world.
Yeah, what's often misunderstood is how different their view of sex was compared to our modern perspective. We have this romanticized image of ancient Rome, but their reality was far more pragmatic. Sex was a way to exert dominance, climb the social ladder, or reinforce existing power structures.
So it's less about who they were attracted to and more about who was in control.
Exactly. Roman society, particularly during the Republic and early Empire, was heavily stratified. Being the passive partner, especially for a freeborn Roman man, brought shame and ridicule. It challenged their masculinity and threatened their place within the social hierarchy. Their worldview wasn't centered around concepts like gay or straight as we understand them today. It was all about who held the power in any given relationship.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure. I can't imagine the anxiety of constantly needing to be the one in charge. It makes you wonder how this obsession with dominance played out in their everyday lives.
It certainly shaped their behaviors and interactions. Think of the Roman feasts we often hear about. These elaborate gatherings weren't just about delicious food and entertainment. They were meticulously orchestrated displays of power and excess, where every detail, including the sexual dynamics, reinforced the existing social order.
We're talking dormice dipped in honey, endless flowing wine, and entertainment that pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable.
These events weren't simply dinner parties. They were public declarations of wealth and status, where the lines between dining and intimate activities blurred. It's important to remember that for the Roman elite, indulgence wasn't just about pleasure. It was about demonstrating their power and influence.
It's almost like they were sending a message, look at how much we can indulge. Look at how much we control.
Precisely. And who better to embody this extravagant lifestyle than the emperors themselves? Figures like Tiberius and Caligula are notorious for their outrageous behavior and are perfect examples of how personal indulgence could be used to reinforce political power.
Oh, yes, the emperors. Let's talk about them. Tiberius, for example, spent years on the island of Capri, indulging in activities that were considered scandalous even by Roman standards. We're talking young boys whom he called tiddlers, performing acts for him in his private pool.
His villa was practically a museum of erotica, filled with sculptures and murals that pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable art at the time. These weren't just private indulgences, they were statements, deliberate expressions of power and control projected onto an empire that was expected to not only accept, but celebrate them.
And then there's Caligula, who seemed to delight in shocking and provoking his subjects. Didn't he ride naked through the streets of Rome, tossing coins at people?
He did, and that was just one of his many shocking behaviors. Caligula blurred the lines between personal pleasure and public performance. He flaunted social norms, used his position to satisfy his desires, and even engaged in acts that would be considered taboo even in ancient Rome.
So it seems these emperors weren't just rulers, they were trendsetters, shaping a society where status dictated everything, including what was considered acceptable behavior, no matter how outrageous it might seem to us today.
But here's where it gets really interesting. While emperors like Tiberius and Caligula were pushing the boundaries of acceptable behavior, Roman society as a whole also had a strict moral code, particularly for women. This created a stark contrast between the freedoms enjoyed by men and the restrictions placed on women.
It seems incredibly hypocritical. On one hand, you have emperors indulging in all sorts of excesses, but on the other, ordinary Romans, especially women, face severe consequences for stepping out of line.
This double standard is one of the most striking features of Roman society. Men, especially those of high status, enjoyed a significant degree of freedom in their sexual behavior. For women, however, adultery was considered a serious offense, potentially punishable by death. Their lives and reputations were often controlled by their fathers or husbands.
It's hard to believe that women could face such harsh punishment, while men, even emperors, could engage in outrageous behaviors without consequence. What about prostitution? Wasn't that common in ancient Rome?
Prostitution was indeed common and even regulated by Roman law. In fact, Emperor Augustus made it the only legal form of extramarital sex, highlighting the contradictions within Roman morality. Men were expected to maintain a respectable facade while discreetly indulging their desires.
So they created a law that essentially said, men, if you want to stray, just make sure you do it quietly and pay for it.
Essentially, yes. It allowed them to uphold a veneer of respectability while simultaneously turning a blind eye to the realities of male desire. The system reinforced male dominance while simultaneously exploiting and marginalizing the women involved, most of whom were slaves with no agency or control over their own lives.
Speaking of exploitation, it's clear that social status played a significant role in shaping Roman sexuality. While the elite flaunted their wealth and indulged in extravagant behaviors, the lives of ordinary Romans, especially women and slaves, were far more restricted and often defined by hardship and lack of agency. It makes you wonder how these different social groups experience and express their sexuality.
That's a crucial question, and it's one that historians are still trying to answer. Our primary sources of information come from the writings and artifacts of the wealthy and powerful, which may not accurately reflect the experiences of the majority of Romans. However, through careful analysis of archaeological evidence, legal documents, and even graffiti, we can start to piece together a more nuanced understanding of Roman sexuality across different social classes.
So while we have these captivating, almost scandalous stories about emperors and their extravagant lifestyles, we need to be careful about generalizing to the entire Roman population. What about their art? The Romans were known for their stunning mosaics and sculptures, and many of them depict scenes of a sexual nature. Do they express their complex views on sex through their art as well?
Absolutely. Roman art and humor offer a fascinating window into their attitudes toward sexuality. From the explicit frescoes found in Pompeii to the suggestive sculptures adorning public bathhouses, the Romans weren't shy about depicting the human body and exploring themes of desire and pleasure.
It sounds like they were much more open about sex than many later cultures. But was this openness universal? Did ordinary Romans view and experience sexuality in the same way as the elite? And how did these contrasting experiences shape Roman society as a whole? We'll explore these questions and more after a quick break. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were exploring those fascinating contradictions in Roman society. The extravagant behaviors of the elite compared to the strict moral code, especially for women. It seems like Roman law played a significant role in reinforcing these social hierarchies and shaping attitudes toward sex.
That's a great observation. Roman law was incredibly detailed when it came to regulating sexual behavior, and those laws often reflected the power dynamics we've been discussing. Remember how adultery was illegal for women, but not for men? That discrepancy highlights how the legal system reinforced male dominance and control over women's lives.
It's as if they created a legal framework that allowed men to exert their power and control, while women were constantly under scrutiny and subject to much harsher punishments.
It wasn't just about personal morality. These laws had political implications as well.
Interesting.
Think about the scandals surrounding emperors like Tiberius and Caligula. Their behavior wasn't just a matter of gossip. Their actions and the public's reaction to them could destabilize the empire.
So these emperors' personal lives weren't just private matters. They were public spectacles that could affect their ability to rule effectively. Did these scandals ever lead to actual consequences?
Absolutely. In Caligula's case, his recklessness and disregard for social norms ultimately contributed to his assassination.
Wow.
His behavior alienated the Senate and the Praetorian Guard, leading to a conspiracy that ended his reign.
No.
It demonstrates just how intertwined personal behavior and political power were in ancient Rome.
It seems like sex and power were inseparable in Roman society. Did this influence other aspects of Roman culture? We've talked about their art, but what about their literature or even their philosophy? Did their views on sex seep into these areas as well?
Roman art, as we discussed, was very open about depicting sexuality. But this openness extended to other forms of expression as well. Their literature is full of erotic poetry, plays that explored themes of desire and infidelity, and even philosophical treatises that grappled with the nature of pleasure and morality.
That's fascinating. I remember seeing some pretty explicit Roman sculptures in museums, but I never considered how their literature might have reflected these same themes. Do you have any specific examples?
Ovid's Ars Amatoria, for example, was essentially a guide to seduction and love affairs, offering advice on everything from attracting a lover to maintaining a discreet affair. It was incredibly popular in its time, highlighting the Roman fascination with love, desire, and the complexities of relationships.
So while Roman society has strict rules and hierarchies, they also seem to have a certain fascination with exploring the complexities of human relationships and desires. But we've mainly focused on the elite. What about the average Roman? Did they experience this same level of openness?
That's where we have to be cautious about making sweeping generalizations.
All right.
Our understanding of Roman sexuality is heavily influenced by the writings and artifacts of the wealthy and powerful.
Yeah.
It's likely that the average Roman, particularly those outside of major urban centers, lived much more conservative lives.
So the wild stories we hear about emperors and their extravagant parties might not represent the everyday reality for most Romans.
Exactly. While Roman society as a whole may have been more open about sex than some later cultures, we can't assume that everyone embraced the excesses of the elite.
Right.
There's evidence to suggest that family, community, and traditional morality played a much more significant role in the lives of ordinary Romans.
It's fascinating to consider how these different experiences, the extravagance of the elite and the more conservative lives of everyday Romans, coexisted and perhaps even influenced each other. We've uncovered so much about this complex and often contradictory society, but there's still so much we don't know.
You're right, and that's the beauty of studying history.
Yeah.
We're constantly uncovering new evidence, challenging our assumptions, and refining our understanding of the past.
So where do we go from here? If our listeners are eager to learn more about the everyday lives of Romans and how they viewed sex and relationships, what resources would you recommend?
That's where things get even more exciting. Archaeologists are constantly uncovering new artifacts and inscriptions that provide glimpses into the daily lives of average Romans. From letters and legal documents to the ruins of homes and shops, these discoveries are helping us build a more nuanced and complete picture of Roman society.
It sounds like we have to look beyond the grand narratives and salacious stories to truly understand how ordinary people lived and loved in ancient Rome.
Exactly. It's about digging deeper, piecing together fragments of information, and approaching the evidence with an open mind. And by doing so, we can continue to unravel the mysteries of Roman sexuality and gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity and diversity of human experience.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring in this steamy and surprisingly complex world of ancient Roman sexuality, uncovering a society where power, status, and social control played a significant role in shaping how people experienced and expressed their desires.
It's been a journey, full of lavish banquets, shocking scandals, and fascinating insights into a culture that viewed sex in a way that's both intriguing and challenging to our modern sensibilities.
What strikes me is the stark contrast between how we view sexuality today compared to the Romans.
Right.
We tend to emphasize personal choice, emotional connection, and individual expression. But for the Romans, sex was often a public matter, intertwined with law, politics, and social standing.
That's a key takeaway from our deep dive. Their society was built on a rigid hierarchy, and that hierarchy extended to every aspect of life, including sexual relationships.
Yeah.
Who you could sleep with, how you could behave, and what consequences you might face were all dictated by your position within that social order.
It makes you wonder how much of our own behavior is still influenced by societal norms that we might not even realize.
Yeah.
We may think we're making free choices, but are we really?
That's a question worth pondering. While we've come a long way in terms of individual freedom and sexual liberation, there are still powerful forces at play that shape our attitudes and behaviors. Think about the media, cultural expectations, and even religious beliefs. These factors can all influence how we perceive and experience sexuality.
So what can our listeners take away from this exploration of ancient Roman sex? Why should they care about what happened thousands of years ago?
I think understanding the past can help us better understand ourselves. By exploring how another culture viewed and regulated sex, we can gain a fresh perspective on our own beliefs and assumptions. It's a reminder that our way of doing things isn't the only way, and that human sexuality is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon.
It also encourages us to be more critical of our own cultural norms and to challenge the systems of power that continue to shape our lives.
Absolutely. By understanding how power dynamics played out in ancient Rome, we can be more attuned to similar patterns in our own society. It's about recognizing the ways in which social structures can influence our choices and behaviors, even when we think we're acting freely.
This has been an eye-opening conversation. It's amazing how much we can learn about a civilization by exploring its attitudes towards sex.
It's a testament to the power of history. By studying the past, we can gain valuable insights into the present and perhaps even shape a more just and equitable future.
If our listeners are interested in continuing this journey of discovery, what resources would you recommend?
I encourage everyone to visit a museum with Roman artifacts. Seeing those sculptures and mosaics in person can truly bring this history to life.
Yeah.
There are also many excellent books and documentaries available that delve deeper into Roman society and culture.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the exploration. There's always more to learn and uncover, so keep asking questions, challenge your assumptions, and stay curious.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.